We are the Keyboard Samurai, a podcast focused on sharing insights to help those working in cybersecurity companies, be them technology or services. Each session, your host, Will Klusovsky, aka Will Clue, sits down with professionals in our industry to illuminate topics that will help your security biz, team, or self be better. Let's hack into it now.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Thanks for joining us. So today we have another CEO. I've had a big string of CEOs lately. So today, Ed Vasko, welcome. How you doing, Ed?
I'm doing great. Thanks for letting me be here. I appreciate it. I really do.
Sounds great. So give us a 20-30-second spiel about who you are and why we care.
Well, William, so I'm the CEO of Highwire Overwatch. We are a leading managed security service provider, or MSSP, really focused in on being very channel friendly. So we work, we don't really work with direct customers. What we work with are managed service providers and other channel partners to ensure that they're providing out the best possible managed security services out to their clientele. We've got a phenomenal partner ecosystem and about almost 1,400 end customers around the country. So we serve a lot. We're one of the top 50, just got named one of the top 50 MSSPs in the nation. And in my background, 33 years as both a cyber practitioner and now 6-time CEO or founder. And so I've been in this space a long time. As you can tell, it's, a lot of gray hair, a few remaining amounts of gray matter. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation. So thanks for letting me be here.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it's interesting too, because we're starting to see, I've seen specifically the channel has become very big in security. Everybody's kind of realized that. And what I mean, like the channel trying to come out and actually find security opportunities. And I've seen more MSSPs and even MSPs go to that full channel model and not have direct client interaction. So it's good to see that you're having success there, and I see other people doing it, and they're clearly on the right path. But so with today, we're going to talk a little bit about technical debt. And so, when I look at things from the grand scheme of somebody in your position specifically, too, somebody who's got a services company or even a product services company, more likely, that whole idea of technical debt takes on a different meaning even than probably, the normal CIO or CTO at a business. So I guess, what are some of the things that, give a little bit of your perspective on how how technical debt and security kind of relates?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think, first I'd say, a lot of wisdom, I guess. And I'm not trying to be braggy in that regard. Just, you spent 33 years doing this, and not just in cyber, but, anytime you're touching within cyber, you're across IT, and business process and so forth. And so one of the things that's near and dear to my heart is helping organizations really realize the level of technical debt, not just operationally, but from a customer facing perspective, and where cyber really intersects with that technical debt. Because, oftentimes within our industry, we're very focused on call it the latest and greatest. We either chase the latest and greatest, or we're trying to make ourselves aware of the latest and greatest in terms of cyber adversaries, cyber criminal organizations, nation states and so forth, and how they're kind of approaching new technologies. And technical debt really is, if I were to sum it up, it's all of those IT related decisions that hang around an organization's neck like albatrosses, and that weigh it down over time. And those technical decisions, have direct and meaningful and long lasting impact. And so, it's a situation where, I'll flip many hats on here, in terms of, I'll start with like a CISO hat. The CISOs of the world are focused on, how do I, reduce threats, reduce avenues of attack, decrease risk, increase my security posture. And oftentimes, we're heavily focused on users and new avenues. And yet, what we're seeing, and I think a lot of the threat reports over 2024 and 2023 support this, is that we're seeing this shift. Our adversaries are shifting back to being able to utilize old unpatched systems. systems that are end of support or end of life that are still being utilized throughout the ecosystem, throughout client ecosystems. And so CISOs are facing this challenge of not only having to defend against the latest and greatest and the newest, and especially areas of innovation by organizations, but they're also having to deal with all of the drag along technical debt.
Yeah.
The geek in me, likes to, I always like to use some sort of pop culture reference, and it's if you've ever seen the original Tron, the 1980s version of Tron, it's the MCP, it's that master control program that's kind of dragging on along, and it's, even though it's got a lot of power, it's still this old antiquated system. And so, that also applies at the executive level, the CEO and the leadership level. You're making decisions today because there's such a need to innovate.
Right.
Every front page of the Wall Street Journal talks about the latest and greatest trend, be it AI, be it quantum, be it some sort of distributed finance, or DeFi, or blockchain, or you name the latest and greatest technology trend. And so from an executive level, there's a constant want and need to continually push for newer and greater and more improved and scalable kinds of processes and technologies. And oftentimes what executives and leadership from IT and business aren't taking into account are the fact that every one of those decisions have an impact, especially if you're not willing to step backward and see your business holistically and realize where there may be technical challenges and where there may be operational challenges associated with that technical debt. Good example, making a decision to stay with a centralized on-prem type of IDF, MDF,
Right.
intermediate and main data facility, data frame kind of space, and essentially having on-site technologies when everybody's pushing to the cloud. You decide, well, everything new will be in the cloud. Okay, that's a good decision, but then have you taken into account the total cost of that IT decision by maintaining all of that on-prem equipment and all of that maintenance, labor, and costs associated with it? And truly, it's typically technical debt starts with the idea, well, it's working, and we don't want to impact that business.
Never want to mess with what's working, do they?
Working, right. That's the key thing, and that's really what it comes down to. And so we have this kind of interesting duality when it comes to tech debt, and it's something that we have to face, especially in light of some of these major changes. Again, be it AI, be it just even machine learning or RPA, be it just from a want to better enhance and utilize the cloud, and make your systems and your service architectures cloud native. Any one of those particular kinds of elements have business impact from a cost and from an operational and people standpoint. They have cyber impact from a, do I open up too much for my adversaries? Do I create new pathways for adversaries? Right. All of those kinds of things.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the vulnerability thing, because I did know I'm working on some content pieces, and so I was going back to like Verizon data breach report and IBM report and all that, and there was a big jump in actually using vulnerabilities to exploit, which is normally not really a major attack vector, right?
Yeah, we've seen this downward trend year over year, where you almost started to say, well, yes, there's validity to an appropriate vulnerability management process. And and inclusive of that, the attack vectors and understanding your attack vectors and how that has impact inside from a patching perspective and so forth. And I don't want to name any names, but there were organizations that I've worked with that have questioned, why do we need a vulnerability management system, or a process? Sure. Because it wasn't an attack vector. People, phishing, ransomware, those have been the major attack vectors.
You've got to prioritize where to spend your money. Go to, everybody's using phishing. I talked to a CISO who told me he had like 600 critical vulnerabilities in his environment. He happened to have pen testers, so he had them test it all, and 0 were exploitable.
Right. Right.
So that's why you need the program, though, to be able to do that and sleep at night and not just hope they aren't.
Well, it's the classic thing. It's like, I've got bars on my windows, but my back door is wide open with a big neon sign that says, "Come rob me." you know so it's all about the idea of, like, not giving up on or recognizing that you've got to understand the environment. And these are, I probably sound like a broken record for anybody who's ever heard me before, because I constantly, I know many of my colleagues around the nation constantly preach, understand your environment, understand the assets, get those documented, understand those threats into those kinds of assets. And it's not just a method of, what's the people vector or what's the latest and greatest, but we've got to look backward. And organizations not willing to look backward find themselves wondering why the house is on fire, because they left their back door wide open.
Asset. I don't think I think any podcast I've been a guest on, asset management almost always comes up.
Always.
And as somebody who's built enough programs or helps CISOs build up, like, that's day one stuff, man. Asset management and impact analysis. Like, do you know what you have?
Yeah. And do you know how critical it is? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like,
so
yes, they're going to the technical debt side of that, like, because they're gonna have these, we've all seen the meme of the drawing of this big piece of new machinery and, like, the little cinder block on the bottom holding it all up, some legacy system. So how do you approach dealing with it, and actually managing not just the risk, but I mean, even with from sort of our audience looking at helping their clients, what kind of things could they be doing to help push them, because that's ultimately going to drive new business too, right?
Sure. Well, I think it's it's in one sense recognizing that if I think about it from a service provider or from a consulting perspective, one is the role of a good consultant is to be that independent voice, and to be willing to put yourself and your brand out in front of the customer's needs. In other words, you have to be willing and strong enough to be able to say to a customer, "I'm going to help you understand that there's, that there's a different way of looking at your space and looking at your organization. And part of that look at your organization is recognizing that," and I'll keep using that same metaphor, you've got bars on your windows and locks on your doors, but your backyard is wide open, and you got a big neon sign that says, "Just come through here and take anything you want." It's helping the customer from a consultative perspective understand that they have made decisions that are going to continue to impact them, and are going to add without them realizing it. This is where a good consultant comes in, is to be able to say, without realizing it, you're actually adding to your total cost of IT. You may not recognize it right now, but as you drag these albatrosses and drag this technology and drag this technical debt along, it's going to slow you down more and more and more. And so, from a service provider perspective, it's understanding that you have to look for those pockets of tech debt. You have to be able to help your clients understand that, hey, we can be front facing and very innovative and forward leaning towards all of these new programs and new requirements and new trends. But let's not forget that, hey, we're running, DNS on an old Windows 3.11 box, somehow that was hacked together years ago.
NT is still somewhere going right.
You got it. And 8-inch floppy disks are still being used, so look for those, being willing to look for those kinds of elements, and that look for that kind of technical debt, and then helping your customers recognize that that's actually slowing them down. It's causing them to go at a slower pace. And so what does that mean? Is if they don't get rid of that tech debt, if they don't take those 2 steps back in order to drive 3 steps forward, they're going to find themselves having to spend more and more and more money as they try to innovate faster and further and farther, because that albatross is just going to weigh them down. It's going to be a big old weight. And then eventually, and this is the really unfortunate thing, and we, consultants, we've been in this space long enough to know and seen these clients that don't want to necessarily listen, and eventually there's a tipping point.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's, so ultimately it's a pay me now or pay me later kind of situation.
Right. Yeah. That's
And
kind of, yeah. It's the same with the breach, right? It's like, look, you can do the things you're supposed to now, or you can get the budget after your breach, right?
You got it.
And it's interesting, you mentioned the like staying ahead of the landscape, which is like, in my mind, that's something when I always talk about like compliance programs, they need to be proactive. And because like when new things come out or major changes come out, especially on the technical side, like we saw this when GDPR first came out, like the way some cloud providers had things structured, you really couldn't be compliant on day one, right?
Right.
You had to make some changes, or you had to adapt your business processes, or maybe things like that. And so, looking at that, like that technical debt from that same perspective of saying, well, if you're not in a highly regulated area, I get it. But if you are, that's something that you have to take into consideration and needs to be thought of, beyond your IT people itself. Like, so let me ask you this on that point, like, do you think, or how many clients have their tech debt on their risk register?
Oh, very, very few, very few. And it's typically those organizations that are large enough and mature enough to recognize the need to track enterprise level risk. And in other words, tech debt is a component of that larger enterprise risk in the same fashion that legal risk would be there. So what my perspective is while there are large organizations that are mature enough that are already doing this, this is a very pervasive challenge throughout the entire industry, and I mean all industries, all sectors. It probably a really good example, representative example, that you almost force tech debt. You have to force it. You've taken on a forced tech debt is in the industrial control space.
Sure.
So critical infrastructure. If I make a capital investment in a power generator, of some sort of generator or some sort of electrical producing system, I'm depreciating that system over a 20-year cycle. It's not a traditional 5-year cycle,
At
and that
least
includes
maybe
all
30 or 40.
Exactly, and that system can't be shut down.
Nope.
It can't be shut down. It can't be impacted. So it's got to remain consistent, remain available. The data within it has to remain confidential. It has to have integrity so that the system works properly. Yet, and there I just laid out the classic CIA triangle of infosec, right? Well, if I need to have access into the system, which is when the system was purchased, it was a closed-ended system, and it had an operational room that was detached from the network, from the wider internet and the wider corporate network. Suddenly, over time, COVID, post-COVID, all these systems
inevitably plugged a server into it.
Exactly. Somebody plugged a server, somebody bridged the networks together so that I could come in from home and I didn't have to, be there 24/7. Any number of valid, appropriate business reasons are suddenly being impacted significantly by the tech debt that you have to take on because of the cost of the infrastructure and the cost of the system and the inability to take it offline. Well, that's critical infrastructure, but it changed that out to a trading floor, change it out to a large scale e-commerce system.
I mean, they know when that thing's down how many dollars they're losing per minute.
That's exactly it. That's exactly the point. So, that's I'll come back and say that's in that large, mature organization. The risk register typically will have some sort of tech debt. We know we can't change this system out. We'll ring fence it. We'll do something else around the system. And so I'll pivot back around, to the service provider and consulting audience. It's helping those businesses that haven't yet reached those maturity levels understand that they have the same challenges. They just haven't maybe realized it. So taking the time to find it is the important thing.
I think that's great advice, and it's guidance I would give to, for those of us doing that consulting. That is a great way to start another conversation well, yes, you're going to help your client, but you're also going to find some pipeline, right?
Yeah.
If you ask the CISO or your point of contact about their technical debt, the risks related to it, and they don't have an answer for it, then that's something that you can say, hey, well, let's bring a couple of guys in, have a conversation, do a whiteboard, something like that. I think could be really valuable. So that's awesome. Ed, you're a smart man. I appreciate your time. Where can everybody find you on the interweb?
I appreciate that. So you can find me a couple of different places. Certainly email. Don't hesitate. I'm happy to give my email. It's ed.vasko, V as in Victor, VASKO @highwirenetworks.com. That's the easiest way. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I can gladly get you my LinkedIn profile. I'd love to connect. Love to connect with your audience and learn more and continue the conversation. And I try to stay off of most other social media sites, just the paranoid person in me. But you can catch me via email. You can catch me via LinkedIn. I try to do as much as I can within the community and the greater cybersecurity space. So you may see me involved in things like workforce development. I'm a big believer in making certain that we're lining up and really advocating and building the next generation of cyber professionals. And that goes across the board from our service members that are coming into civilian life, to the younglings graduating from college and university, to the people who want to upskill, reskill. That's another passion of mine, is just helping people get into this space, because we need everybody here. And there's such great stuff to do and such great work to accomplish. So
that's great.
Glad to connect with anybody.
That's great. Well said, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having us, or thanks for being here.
Yeah. Thanks, William. I appreciate it.
Thanks for enjoying Keyboard Samurai Podcasts. If you'd like to engage, find Will on LinkedIn at /WillClue or visit at willclue.me. That's WILKLU.me for more info. Disconnecting now. Synac you later.